Justin, how to answer questions that Google cannot answer. Example question. How many pool repairmen are there in Massachusetts? First off, you're going to start by breaking down the question into many different subcategories. Justin, let's run this thought experiment. Okay, well, first off, you have to ask the question, how many people are there in Massachusetts? Justin, how many pool repairmen are there in Massachusetts?
Gotcha, Josh. If memory serves, there's about 6.9 million people that live in Massachusetts. And so you know the answer is going to be somewhere in between 0 and 6.9 million. You also know that the answer is probably not 0, and probably not everyone in Massachusetts is a pool repairman. And so you start kind of backing into the problem. If you can't jump into the answer, back into it. So you could say, okay, well, listen, of that 6.9 million, how many people actually own homes, or how many people have a pool that need to be serviced? So you maybe do some back of the napkin math, and you say, well, let's just say on average, 1 out of every 4 families has a pool that needs to be serviced. And let's also assume that maybe out of that 6.9 million,
ballpark estimate, half of the people in Massachusetts own homes. So you take that 6.9 million down to what, 3.4 million?
Yeah, so I should say 3.5, but then you probably want to trim it down just a little bit more, because if you have a couple that's married, the husband's not going to own a home and the wife's not going to own a home. They're going to own the same home and live together. So you might say,
I think you can take that even further, because the people who have pools are going to be families, and that's going to be a family of 4. So of that 3.5 million home owners, there's probably not going to be just a couple who owns a pool. It's probably going to be a family of at least 4. So you can take those homeowners and divide that by 4. And
let's just say there's 1 million homes that could theoretically have a pool that needs to be serviced. And of those 1 million homes, again, this is just back of the napkin math, let's just say 1 out of every 4 of those homes actually has a pool. So now you're at 250,000, roughly. And this is all just back of the napkin math of what's going on here. And then you say, okay, well, listen, if a pool needs to be serviced, again, once every 5 years or so, 250,000 divided by 5 takes you to 50,000. So there's 50,000 pools on average, assuming our assumptions are correct, which they probably won't be for that. But the key thing in all of this, and then you figure out, okay, well, if it takes on average, 3 hours, for a repairman to service a pool from, let's say, like driving to the pool, going to the store, 3 hours. And they could do 1 pool in the morning, 1 pool midday, 1 pool in the afternoon. So you've got 3 pools per day. Let's say they work 5 days a week. That means that at one pool repairman has a capacity of 15 pools per week. Again, let's just assume that there's one big mono season in there's not, but just to make it easy, let's assume that there is. So you say, okay, well, listen, if you've got 50,000 pools that need to be serviced, and assuming that all pools that need to be serviced are being serviced, then you would just take the 50,000, divide it by 15, and, bam, there's your answer. Now, that being said, the reason that you kind of want to do the thought experiment from all this is that you lay out your assumptions, and it is perfectly fine to guess, and I would argue it's perfectly fine to say, like, listen, I don't know what the number is. I need to do more research, but I get that there's a component here. And this is, I think, to the point about, problem solving. As the old phrase goes, how do you eat an elephant, Josh? You eat it 1 bite at a time. And so by doing all of this, and kind of by taking your work, or just maybe make a little Excel spreadsheet or whatever, right? As you get more data, or as your data gets refined, you can actually better improve your estimates. This is actually Bayesian statistics that's going on right here. When you don't know what the answer is, it's bloody and it's messy, but you start with just split the difference or whatever, right? But then you also know that as you go further in, you can get and start, adding more and tweaking and whatever. And as the more you tweak, the more data, probably the closer you can get to what the real answer is. But to your point, don't be intimidated by a big problem. Think, okay, well, listen, I've got this weird question, whatever, right? Can I break it down into sub-questions or assumptions that can help guide and lead my thinking so that I can get a better answer? Or even if I can't do that, can I at least figure out sub-questions that I can also ask that will help me answer the big question?
Yeah, I originally saw an example like this in the book Super Forecasting. It's a fantastic book that really helped my critical thinking abilities. The importance of this and why it really matters is because you're faced in the real world with extreme difficulties and many problems that need to be thought out carefully, especially in the real world. We're just taking a fun, stupid example, but you can literally apply this to pretty much anything. And if you can just ask yourself sub-questions about a broader question, you can have a reasonable guess. You can have a guesstimate on pretty much any question humanly possible. And like if you can assume certain assumptions like we could here. Of course, some questions will be different and be definite, but some like this, Google will never find the answer to. And pretty much any question that's ungoogleable, you can really dig down that question into extreme subcategories and get at least much closer to the answer than if you were just guessing.
Yeah.
Or you at least are thinking about the question accurately. And that is almost more important than solving the question.
Yeah. And sometimes maybe the question can be answered by asking a subset of questions. And just by thinking about that question, like it'll help guide your thinking in the right direction. So again, one bite at a time.
Yeah, this is really how you can improve your critical thinking and problem solving abilities, and you can apply it to pretty much anything in this world. Of course, if you are bright and have been watching the channel for a while, you are going to come to one extreme conclusion. Josh, there is not just a few thousand pool boys in Massachusetts. I know from experience that there are many times more.
I suppose there's lots of bored housewives wherever you go. So yes, that is a good